Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really critical and sensitive case. A single horrific crime that just exploded, really within weeks, from a local tragedy into this massive national political and legislative storm.
It really did.
We're focusing on the murder of 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia, back in February of 2024.
Yeah, and this case is such a textbook example of how, a localized failure can just amplify an existing national debate. Our mission here is to really get past the headlines and pull out the facts.
Right.
So we're looking at three things. First, the shocking technological precision that mapped out the final moments of the crime. Second, the trail of missed legal opportunities with the perpetrator.
And third.
And third, an unbiased look at the federal law that came out of it, the Laken Riley Act, and what its immediate impact really was, both legally and politically.
So, Laken Riley, she was an Augusta University nursing student, a former UGA undergrad. She was murdered while she was out for a run in Oconee Forest Park. For you, the key thing to understand is how the perpetrator's history, who he was, his run-ins with the law, became the specific catalyst that just vaulted this tragedy onto the national stage. Let's start with the timeline, because the data from surveillance and her smart devices, it just paints this haunting picture of her last morning.
It is remarkably detailed. I mean, thanks to modern tech. At 8:55 a.m., she texts her mom, so she's about to go for a run.
Just a normal morms?
Completely normal. Then at 9:03 a.m., she calls her mom. They're talking on the phone. By 9:06 a.m., camera footage actually shows her jogging toward the park. The attack, it happened almost immediately after she went in.
And here's where it gets, frankly, just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
The sources show the attack occurred in this terrifyingly tight window. We're talking between 9:66 and 9:32 a.m.
And this is where that forensic technology becomes so central. Well, you have two pieces of digital evidence that gave police these crucial data points. First, her phone calls 911 at 9:11 a.m.
Wow.
It was probably triggered during the struggle, but it confirms the assault started right around that time. But second, and this is the most critical piece, the data from her Garmin watch.
She was wearing it.
She was wearing it, and it showed her heart stopped at 9:28 a.m. That digital signature gave investigators a precise moment of death.
And an endpoint for the crime scene search.
Exactly. It just narrowed everything down incredibly.
And the medical details, they really underscore the violence of what investigators first called a crime of opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. The cause of death was blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. The medical examiner detailed a complex skull fracture. She had been struck 8 times on the left side of her head.
With a rock.
With a rock. Investigators also concluded there was an attempted sexual assault. So, calling it a crime of opportunity suggests it was unplanned, but the ferocity of it points to extreme intent once that opportunity was there.
And for the UGA community, I mean, this was a massive shock.
A huge shock. This was the first murder on the UGA campus since 1983.
So that context really sets the stage for the perpetrator, Jose Antonio Ibarra, a 26-year-old Venezuelan man. His history in the U.S. is really the core of the policy debate that came next.
Right. So Ibarra entered the U.S. illegally near El Paso, Texas. That was in September 2022. He was processed by federal authorities and then released into the country.
And from there?
He eventually made his way to the Roosevelt Hotel migrant shelter in New York City before he traveled down to Georgia to be with his brother.
And his history with law enforcement after that, it's just this chronicle of missed signals, of, cross-jurisdictional confusion.
That's the perfect way to put it. And it's what critics later used to frame this whole thing as a system failure.
So what was the first sign?
The first major red flag was in September 2023 in New York City. He was arrested there for misdemeanor charges. It was for injuring a child under 17 and a motor vehicle violation.
Okay, and what happened?
Well, ICE later said they missed the chance to issue a detainer on him.
Okay, stop there. For anyone listening who might not know the mechanism, what exactly is a detainer, and why would ICE miss it in New York?
So a detainer is basically a request from ICE, that's Federal Immigration Enforcement, to local police to hold a person for 48 hours after they're supposed to be released. It gives ICE time to come and pick them up for deportation proceedings.
And in New York?
Well, many places, including New York City, have what you might call sanctuary policies. They limit their cooperation with these requests, especially for low-level misdemeanors like his. So because of those policies and the nature of the charges, ICE either couldn't or just failed to follow through before he was released.
So he's released in New York. A month later, he's in Georgia.
Yes. In October 2023, he and his brother get arrested for shoplifting from a Walmart in Athens. And here's where another critical piece of context comes in.
Which is?
His brother was reportedly linked to the Venezuelan organized crime group, Tren de Aragua.
That's a significant detail that I feel like gets lost in the shuffle. Why is Tren de Aragua relevant here?
Well, they're a notoriously violent transnational gang. They started in Venezuelan prisons, and U.S. authorities have been tracking their expansion. They often use migration routes to set up illicit operations. So while Ibarra himself wasn't charged with gang activity, just being that close to a known member, it just amplified the security concerns.
And the political pressure.
Exactly. It fed right into the debate about border enforcement and organized crime.
So after that shoplifting arrest, Ibarra then fails to show up for court in December 2023.
Right. Which means he had an active bench warrant out for his arrest at the time of the murder in February 2024.
Let's talk about the investigation and conviction then. It happened so fast. What was the decisive evidence?
The police work was incredibly swift. They got their first break from surveillance footage. It showed a man throwing a jacket into a dumpster near Ibarra's apartment, which was about a mile from the park.
And the jacket was key.
It was. They found Riley's hair on that jacket. And when the police questioned Ibarra, they noted he had scratches on his arms. His knuckles were red.
But the core of the case, that was the direct DNA evidence, right?
Yeah.
At his bench trial.
It was absolutely decisive. The prosecution presented Ibarra's DNA found under Riley's fingernails, which points to a desperate struggle, and his fingerprint was on her phone screen.
He was indicted on 10 counts, including murder, attempted rape, and this unusual peeping Tom charge.
Yes, and that peeping Tom charge, it's for allegedly spying on another student the same day. It really suggests this wasn't just a random, spontaneous act.
Even though it was initially labeled a crime of opportunity.
Exactly. The park attack might have been opportunistic, but that other charge, it implies he was actively looking for a target that morning. It suggests a pattern of predatory behavior that really complicates that simple narrative.
And the outcome?
He was found guilty on all counts in November 2024, sentenced to life without parole.
So the legal closure was swift, but the ripple effects were already shaking up the national debate. You have this moment where personal grief just collides head-on with the national political machine.
The transition was jarring, really. The community response was huge. Riley's family started the Laken Riley Foundation to honor her. But because the facts about the perpetrator's immigration status were so clear, the case was immediately absorbed by this intense pre-existing debate over border security.
This is where the tragedy becomes a political flashpoint. It provided this very specific, visceral ammunition for people arguing for stricter border controls.
Absolutely. If you look impartially at how the case was used, the narrative was framed very quickly. The sources show the murder became a touchstone issue for former President Donald Trump's 2024 campaign.
Right. He often grouped it with other tragic cases involving non-citizens.
Exactly. The strategy was to link a local crime directly to a federal policy failure.
And that drama played out right on the floor of Congress during the State of the Union.
That's right. President Biden was challenged directly by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene to acknowledge Riley. And when he did, the political theater around that moment and him using the term "an illegal" to describe the killer, it just solidified the case's status as this highly visible political tool.
The polarization after that was just intense.
It was. Republicans, voices like Senator Lindsey Graham claimed this tragedy would decisively shift the 2024 election.
And on the other side,
Democrats accused the GOP of exploitation. You had leaders like Representative Jerry Nadler saying Republicans were using the tragedy for a partisan stunt, and Representative Veronica Escobar accused them of dangerous political games. It's just crucial for you to understand we are simply reporting on these intensely polarized reactions.
And those reactions really served as the engine for what came next.
They did.
But we should also just briefly touch on the broader context of safety for women. This case resonated so deeply with the running community. It brought back memories of other high-profile murders of female runners, Molly Tibbetts, Karina Vetrano.
Yes, that sense of shared vulnerability in public spaces, it became a really important emotional part of the conversation.
And all of that political firestorm led directly to federal legislation, like the Riley Act. So what are the core teeth of this law? How does it try to fix the specific loopholes that Ibarra fell through?
The Act is a really surgical response to that sequence of events. It has two highly specific, very impactful provisions. First, it mandates federal detention of any non-citizen who is arrested for burglary or theft.
Okay, why those specific crimes? Burglary and theft. That seems very targeted.
It is highly targeted. It was chosen precisely because Ibarra's last arrest before the murder was for theft in Georgia. By mandating detention for even these, relatively minor property crimes, the act tries to eliminate that legal gray area that let him get released.
But it takes away the local discretion.
It does. The
Right.
kind of discretion that often prevents ICE detainers from being honored for crimes that aren't classified as violent felonies.
And the second provision, this one seems almost more radical. It really shifts the balance of power between states and the federal government.
It is a massive institutional shift. The second provision allows states to sue the federal government for failing to enforce immigration laws.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, traditionally, immigration enforcement has been almost the exclusive domain of the federal government. This act creates a whole new legal avenue for state attorneys general to challenge Washington's policies in court.
The journey of this bill is also interesting because it spanned two different Congresses.
It really highlights legislative persistence.
Hmm.
So the bill first passed the House back in March 2024. It had strong bipartisan support. Even then, 37 Democrats voted for it. But the Senate, which was then controlled by Democrats, stole it.
So it died in that session.
It died in that session. But that failure became a political talking point during the election, which guaranteed it would come back.
And it did.
It did. On January 7th, 2025, in the new Congress, it passed the House again. This time with even stronger bipartisan numbers. 48 Democrats joined all the Republicans. That jump in support just showed how much the political pressure had ramped up.
And it was signed into law pretty quickly in the new presidential term.
Very quickly. An amended version passed the Senate later that month, also with bipartisan support. And it was signed into law by President Donald Trump on January 29th, 2025. It was the very first piece of legislation he signed in his second term.
Okay, let's synthesize this. We have a singular, horrifying crime that was mapped second by a smartwatch. We have a perpetrator who fell through multiple enforcement cracks in two different states, and then an immediate, powerful legislative reaction designed to close those exact loopholes.
The velocity of it all is remarkable. I mean, from the crime happening to the law being enacted in less than a year. But what stands out most, legally, is that profound shift we talked about. It's not just about mandatory detention for theft. It's about that revolutionary provision allowing states to sue the federal government over enforcement.
Which raises a really essential question for you to think about going forward. By giving states this new power to challenge federal immigration policies in court, are we looking at a future where immigration enforcement becomes this checkerboard of different policies constantly being fought over in court instead of a unified federal system?
That specific power is a legal mechanism that could fundamentally reshape federalism in this country, well beyond the scope of just this one tragic case. Its legal life is really only just beginning.
A tough but crucial deep dive into how a single tragedy can redefine national policy. We'd encourage you to continue exploring the legislative and legal dynamics around the new provisions of this law.